state language, we are going to discuss the linguicide on the temporarily occupied territories. Hello, dear friends, dear representatives of the media. Congratulations on the Constitution Day of Ukraine. This is the main law of Ukraine, and it's not only the symbol of our fight. This is our strategic priority on the way to our victory, because according to the Constitution of Ukraine, each citizen has to be protected and not limited in their rights. In the times of Russian genocide against the Ukrainian nation, when we see thousands and dozens of thousands victims in the occupied territories and in the government-controlled territories, we can see quite serious crimes against humanity. As a person who has stayed in the office for about 2 years, since the very beginning we had the priority to implement the language legislation and also to collect the facts about the persecution against Ukrainian citizens because of the language they use. So the issue of linguicide or language discrimination, this is one of the concepts that are the foundations of the decision of the Constitutional Court, and the case was against the constitutionality of the law of the state service. So there is a threat to the national language, and this is one of the priorities of our work. And based on the ruling of the Constitutional Court, according to which the threat to Ukrainian language is equal to the threat of the Ukrainian nation, because the language is not only the means of communication, but also the DNA of the nation. And thus, Ukrainian nation is threatened to lose its status as the leading nation in the country. So the presentation I am making today is based on the data we have collected since February 24th, especially in some specific regions of Ukraine. This is not exhaustive data, but this is one of the first attempts to present the data collected from open sources, from social media, from the local governments, and based on our monitoring, which again is one of the parts of the duties of our secretariat. Hence the name, the Russian linguicide policy as a part of genocide against the Ukrainian nation. I like to point out that the first attempt of such a research was conducted back in February, and back then, together with the leaders of the Crimean Tatar nation and with other partners, we have first published the data about linguicide in Donetsk, Lugansk regions and the Crimea. So today we will be speaking about the territories that have been occupied since February 24th and the ones that have been fortunately liberated. Linguicide is happening in education, in culture, in the media, in the document flow processes, and other types of linguicides in the occupied territory of Ukraine. In the media, the first manifestation of discrimination of linguicide took place as a form of the destruction of seizure of Ukrainian TV channels. Here in this image, you can see that the cases were happening in Kherson region, in Zaporizhia region, in the main district centers that had their own TV. These TV channels had to stop their activity, and also the so-called zombie mobiles, which all the world has witnessed. They were used in the locations of the occupied territories in order to spread the occupiers' lies. And some of our recommendations include doing everything possible to punish the guilty and to stop such broadcasts. So the example of Mariupol is just one of many, because there were similar cases in a number of other Ukrainian communities, so the signs in Ukrainian language were substituted with the ones in Russian. This is yet another example of the linguicide, because this limits the rights of Ukrainian citizens to get the proper information, and it is also against the law on advertising. Also, the dismantling and destruction of national symbols, national banners, the memorial plaques commemorating the deceased Ukrainian warriors, and also hundreds of destroyed institutions of culture, education, which housed school libraries, museums. There were exhibitions commemorating the veterans of the war in Ukraine. We are documenting such cases and collecting this information. In education, education is one of the most vulnerable fields, and we know the cases about changing the curricula and substituting the Ukrainian language, the history and literature, substituting them with similar subjects concerning Russia. We know that teachers are being kidnapped, special camps are being established in order to retrain them before the next educational year. These cases are known to the Ukrainian society, and we are also aware of that. Some examples include the communities of Katyzhanka, Donskep, Mariupol, Henichsk, Kakhovka, Skadovsk, etc. And also the propaganda unions are being established in education, such as the UNARM organization, and this is also happening in higher education and professional education, and the same is happening in the places like Hostomel. There are numerous cases which should be properly documented. This is discrimination. This is a manifestation of genocide and linguicide. In the cultural space, there are numerous facts with signs of genocide, and the examples include the destruction of libraries, the confiscation of school literature and textbooks, the destruction of books depicting Ukrainian history of the 20th century, and specifically the books on the events of the Great Hunger, the persecution of the dissidents in the Soviet Union. For instance, the books like the case of Vasil Stus by the journalist Kipiani, and after the occupation of communities in Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and other regions where such facts were noticed, there were events in the Russian language. Newspapers are being published in the Russian language with the Kremlin propaganda narratives. We can easily guess what can be published in such media, and also in the official space, the occupiers impose the Russian language. There is the discussion of transitioning all the document processing into the Russian language. There are dozens of such examples, and the scariest thing is that underage people are also getting involved in these processes. People are being forced to reproduce pro-Russian messages before cameras. So as I have mentioned back then in 2021, right now we also insist that many of these cases that I have presented here are posing a threat to the national security, to the government, and specifically to the Ukrainian language. And at the same time, today we are speaking of the rights and the protection of the citizens of Ukraine, because this is a day of Constitution. So these issues should be the focus of attention for Ukrainian government and for international organizations which can use these facts in their further investigations. We are doing our best for Ukrainian institutions to get hold of these documents. For instance, the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, the European institutions paying some attention to the subject. And finally, I'd like to point out the following. In the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the participation of the Ministry of the Internal and the Prosecutor General, I had a chance to meet the special commission established by the UN to study the crimes against the Ukrainian nation. And I do hope that these materials will be included into their investigation, and the enemy, both Putin and everyone involved in these processes of the persecution of people and violating the national and international law, I hope all of these people will be punished. And according to the ruling of the Constitutional Court, in this and other issues, the Ukrainian government has to be steadfast, and the annual report is published on our website. And actually, since July 16th, there is a new article of the language law is being introduced, and right now it's going to be obligatory to use the Ukrainian language by websites, by local governments, etc. Hopefully you will get interested in the subject and help us to spread this information. Together we will make sure that each criminal will be held accountable for their actions. Thank you for this in-depth analytics. Now your questions, dear colleagues. Current form, you have mentioned that since the 16th of July, this new article will be enacted. Right now, it's happening in the media that many of the local government officials are sharing about the situation in their communities in Russian, and sometimes they are doing this upon the request of the TV presenters. So is your office tracking such cases, and what should be the response of the government? Thank you. According to Article 9 on the law of the Ukrainian language, the heads of the regional military administrations and also other officials of the local governments have to be able to speak the Ukrainian language and to provide their statements in the Ukrainian language. We are monitoring their statements, including the statements on social and printed media. We have data about some specific persons who, in our opinion, are not following this Article 9 of the current law on the Ukrainian language. Thus, I would like to request representatives of the media to demand such public officials to provide information in the Ukrainian language, especially during the time of the martial law. We are not noticing such demands on the part of the media. And also, since the 16th of July, it will be obligatory to interpret the non-government language into the state language of Ukraine. And also we are monitoring the All Ukrainian TV marathon, and we are noticing that the broadcasts to YouTube is ensured, and the interpretation into Russian language is also ensured. So on top of that, since 16th of July, we should not only impose fines on such officials, but we need to help such officials to actually observe the law of Ukraine on Ukrainian language. Otherwise, we are threatening the state security of Ukraine. Other questions? I'm Lyudmila Alinik from Media Maidan. What mechanisms can be used as of today for collaboration with other government institutions in order to strengthen the control not only in the media but also in other areas of life? So we are focusing first and foremost on the facts of linguicide in the occupied territories today, and these facts should be an additional argument to persuade those who are still misperceiving the public communication as the communication in their free time. And our institution, once again, I would like to encourage everyone to use our official resources and also to look into the rulings of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. The citizens of Ukraine have to speak the Ukrainian language in their official use. There were over 200 state control measures conducted specifically against those who are providing language in a language different than the state language, and it's their responsibility before their communities as well. Other questions?
Please. Thank you. American National Public Radio. Apologies if I missed this in the beginning, but is your office tracking any language restrictions in newly occupied territories after February 24th? What kinds of restrictions have you been able to document over language?
Thank you for your question. Indeed, that's the essence of my presentation today. It was about the facts of violating the rights of Ukrainian citizens concerning language since February 24th, 2022. So we are noticing this in a number of areas, such as education, first and foremost, school education, also culture, media, also external advertising, and also the official documents. So these facts have been collected and published by us, and on a weekly basis we are publishing this brief digest in the English language, and we are also submitting it to the international organizations. So we are for instance, communicating with the Federation of the Language Institutions that unite over 50 countries, such as Baltic countries, Spain, Portugal, Germany, etc., the countries which are active in their support of our country. So these language digests are being also distributed through international media. On the 21st of March, we have became the member of the Federation of International Media, and also quite soon there will be a big conference where the main subject will be the linguicide of the Ukrainian language at the occupied territories. So we are ready to make this information available for you to use them in your materials. Thank you. This was Taras Kremin, the Commissioner on the Protection of the State Language. Thank you, dear friends, for staying with us. And right now, we are fixing the